The XYZ Referral Method, how one conversation creates 10. Most people think referrals are a reward. You do good work, you deliver results, and then if you're lucky someone mentions your name to a friend. That's the story we've been told. Work hard, be good at what you do, and referrals will come naturally. They won't. I know because I've lived on both sides of this. I've been the person sitting by the phone waiting for the next warm introduction that never came, and I've been the person who finally figured out that referrals don't happen because you deserve them. They happen because you engineered the conditions for them to happen. And here's the part that stings. The people getting the most referrals right now are not necessarily better than you. They're not smarter. They don't have a superior product. What they have is a system, a repeatable, designed mechanism that turns every single relationship into a potential growth channel. And most of you don't have that system. Not because you can't build one, but because nobody ever told you that you should. Today I'm going to break down exactly how that system works. I call it the XYZ Method, and it's grounded in neuroscience, relationship economics, and the kind of hardened sales wisdom that doesn't come from motivational posters. By the end of this, you'll understand not just what to do, but why it works at the level of the brain, and how to practice it until it becomes instinct. Let's get into it. The default way most people think about referrals goes something like this. I'll focus on doing excellent work, and my happy clients will naturally tell other people about me. This sounds reasonable. It even sounds noble, like you're above the dirty business of asking for things. But there's a fundamental flaw in this logic, and the flaw is not about effort or quality. The flaw is about how human memory actually works. Here's the reality. Your client had a great experience with you. They're genuinely satisfied. They might even like you as a person. But 3 weeks later, when their colleague mentions a problem that you could solve perfectly, your client's brain does not automatically surface your name. It doesn't work that way. The brain is not a search engine optimized for your benefit. The brain is a pattern-matching machine that responds to cues, and if you haven't installed the right cues in that person's mind, you simply won't come up in the conversation when it matters. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. Your hippocampus, the brain structure responsible for contextual memory, stores experiences along with their associated contexts. When your client thinks about their own business problems, your name might come up because there's a direct contextual link. But when their friend mentions a completely different scenario, in a different setting, with different emotional framing, the retrieval pathway to your name might not activate at all. The memory is there, the connection just doesn't fire. So do good work and hope is not a referral strategy. It's a prayer. And prayers are fine for some things, but they're a terrible business model. The second mistake people make is the opposite extreme. They ask for referrals in a way that feels transactional and forced. They finish a project. They send an email that says, "Do you know anyone else who could benefit from my services?" And the client reads it and feels a subtle, almost imperceptible cringe. Not because the question is wrong, but because the timing, the framing, and the emotional context are all wrong. You've just finished a transaction, and now you're immediately opening another one. The client's brain registers this as extraction, not exchange. And the moment someone feels extracted from, the relationship quality drops. You might still get a name, but you won't get the kind of referral that actually converts, because the referral itself will carry the emotional residue of that transaction. So both extremes fail. Passive hope fails because the brain doesn't naturally retrieve your name in the right contexts. Aggressive asking fails because it triggers the wrong emotional signal in the relationship. And this is where most people get stuck, caught between doing nothing and doing something that feels wrong. The XYZ method solves this by changing the entire frame of what a referral actually is. It's not a favor someone does for you. It's not a transaction. It's a natural extension of a relationship that you've deliberately designed to produce value in multiple directions simultaneously. Let me give you the core idea in one sentence, and then I'll spend the rest of this video unpacking it. A referral is not something you ask for. It's something that becomes inevitable when you structure your relationships to make the other person look good, feel competent, and expand their own influence. Read that again. The referral is not about you. It never was. The moment you stop thinking about referrals as something you receive and start thinking about them as something the other person wants to give, because giving it makes them more valuable in their own network, the entire game changes. You stop chasing. You start building a system where people chase the opportunity to connect others to you. Now let me explain why this works at the neurological level, because if you understand the mechanism, you won't need to memorize tactics. You'll be able to adapt in real time. There are 3 brain systems that matter here, and the XYZ method activates all 3 of them in the person you want to refer you. The first is the dopamine prediction system. Your brain doesn't just release dopamine when something good happens. It releases dopamine when it predicts something good is about to happen. This is why anticipation often feels better than the reward itself. When you build a relationship where you consistently deliver unexpected value, not just meeting expectations, but creating small positive surprises, you train the other person's brain to associate you with a dopamine prediction signal. Every time they think of you, or every time a relevant situation comes up, their brain generates a small hit of anticipatory reward. That's what makes your name sticky. That's what makes it surface in conversations where it otherwise wouldn't. But here's the key. This only works with consistency over time. One big impressive gesture doesn't train the prediction circuit. What trains it is a pattern of repeated, slightly unexpected value, a useful article sent at the right moment, a connection made before being asked, a follow-up that demonstrates you were actually listening 3 months ago. These small acts compound neurologically. They literally reshape the synaptic connections associated with your identity in the other person's brain. The second system is the mirror neuron network. When you genuinely focus on making the other person look good, you give them credit publicly. When you create situations where they feel competent and valued, their mirror neuron system registers something profound. They don't just feel grateful, they feel seen. And when a person feels genuinely seen by you, their brain creates a reciprocity loop that operates below conscious awareness. They don't think, I should refer someone to Leon because he made me look good. They feel a deep, non-verbal pull to include you in their world, to bring you into conversations, to expand the connection. This is not manipulation. This is the natural social bonding mechanism that humans evolved to navigate complex tribal relationships. You're not exploiting it. You're participating in it authentically. The third system is what I call the identity circuit, and this is the one almost nobody talks about. Every person has a self-concept, a story they tell themselves about who they are. When you make a referral, you're not just connecting 2 people. You're performing an identity act. You're saying to yourself and to the world, I am the kind of person who knows valuable people and can make important connections. That feels good. That reinforces a positive self-concept. And people will repeat behaviors that reinforce their positive self-concept far more reliably than they'll repeat behaviors they were asked to do. So the XYZ method is designed to activate all 3 of these circuits. The dopamine prediction system through consistent, unexpected value. The mirror neuron network through genuine recognition and status elevation. And the identity circuit by making the act of referring you an expression of the referrer's own competence and social value. When all 3 are active, referrals don't feel like a favor. They feel like an opportunity. And people don't resist opportunities, they seek them out. Now let me connect this to some larger thinking frameworks, because this isn't just a sales trick. This is a fundamental principle about how value moves through networks. Naval Ravikant talks about specific knowledge, the kind of knowledge that can't be trained for, that comes from your unique combination of experiences, skills, and obsessions. Here's what most people miss about specific knowledge in the context of referrals. Your specific knowledge is invisible until someone else articulates it for you in their own words to their own network. You can write about it. You can talk about it on video. But the most powerful transmission of your specific knowledge happens when a third party says to someone else, "You need to talk to this person. They understand something that nobody else I know understands." That third-party endorsement is not just social proof. It's a translation of your specific knowledge into the language and context of a new audience. And that translation is exponentially more powerful than anything you could say about yourself, because it comes pre-filtered through trust. Charlie Munger's concept of the Lollapalooza effect, where multiple psychological forces converge in the same direction to produce an outsized result, is exactly what the XYZ method creates. You're not relying on one factor. You're stacking dopamine prediction plus social reciprocity plus identity reinforcement plus specific knowledge transmission plus trust transfer, all in the same interaction pattern. Each force alone might produce a modest result. Together, they produce exponential growth. That's why I call this a referral engine, not a referral tactic. An engine produces continuous output. A tactic produces a one-time result. And here's where the creative systems thinking comes in, drawing from the research on creativity as a systems-level phenomenon, not an individual trait. Referral networks are creative systems. When you connect person A to person B, you're not just transferring a contact. You're creating the conditions for new combinations of knowledge, capability, and opportunity that didn't exist before. The most powerful referral isn't, "This person can solve your problem." The most powerful referral is, "This person will change how you think about your problem." That's a creative act. And when your referrers start making that kind of introduction on your behalf, you're no longer just getting leads. You're getting positioned at the intersection of ideas, which is where the highest value opportunities always live. Now let's talk about how to actually build this, because understanding the theory is one thing, installing the behavior is another, and the gap between knowing and doing is where most people's referral ambitions go to die. The XYZ method has 3 components, and each one maps to a specific practice you can train. X is for experience design. This is about deliberately structuring every interaction so the other person walks away with a slightly better version of their own story. Not your story, their story. Most salespeople and most professionals make the mistake of trying to impress. They talk about their achievements, their credentials, their capabilities. And the client listens politely and forgets everything within 48 hours. Experience design means you flip the lens. In every meeting, every call, every email exchange, you are asking yourself, how does this person's understanding of their own situation improve because of this interaction? If they leave a conversation with you and they can now articulate their own problem more clearly, or they can see an opportunity they couldn't see before, or they simply feel more confident in a decision they were struggling with, you have given them a piece of their own story. And that's the piece they will remember. That's the piece they will tell others about. The practice here is specific. After every significant interaction, write down one sentence. This person now understands X better than they did before they talked to me. If you can't write that sentence, the interaction didn't create referral fuel. It might have been pleasant, it might have been professional, but it didn't give the other person something they can carry forward and share. So you train yourself to make every conversation a slight upgrade in the other person's clarity. Not by lecturing, not by showing off, by asking questions that reveal things they hadn't considered, by reframing their situation in a way that creates new options, by listening so carefully that you can reflect their own thinking back to them in a more organized form than they could produce on their own. This is deliberate practice applied to relationship building. You're not just being nice. You're training a specific skill, the skill of creating cognitive value in every interaction. And you get better at it the same way you get better at anything, by setting a clear target, practicing at the edge of your current ability, getting feedback, and making precise corrections. Y is for yield positioning. This is where most people completely fumble the referral opportunity. Yield positioning means you make it easy and attractive for someone to refer you by giving them a clear, compelling, and specific description of who you help and what changes when you do. Not what you do, what changes. Here's what I mean. If someone asks your client what you do and your client says, "Oh, he's a software developer," or "she's a consultant," that's a dead referral. It goes nowhere. Because the person hearing that has no way to connect it to a specific need in their world. But if your client says, "He built this AI system that basically acts as a personal coach for salespeople, it reviews their calls, spots patterns they're missing, and helps them close more deals," now the person hearing that immediately starts scanning their own network for people who need exactly that. The referral activates because the description is specific, outcome-oriented, and vivid. You have to give your referrers the language to refer you, and that language has to be simple, concrete, and anchored in outcomes, not processes. This is not about crafting a clever elevator pitch for yourself. This is about crafting a clear, memorable sentence that someone else can say about you in a conversation you're not part of. And the only way to know if your yield positioning works is to test it. Tell 5 people your one-sentence description, and then a week later ask them to repeat it back to you. If they can't, it's too complicated. If they can repeat the words but can't explain why it matters, it's too abstract. You need to iterate until the sentence is so clear and so vivid that it practically refers itself. The deliberate practice here is iteration and testing. Write your yield sentence. Share it. Measure whether it sticks. Refine it. Share it again. This is edge of ability training for communication precision. Z is for zero friction bridging. This is the operational piece, making the actual act of referring you so easy that it requires almost no effort from the referrer. Remember the identity circuit I mentioned earlier. People want to refer you if it makes them look good. But even when they want to, they often don't because the logistics feel like work. They'd have to compose an email, explain who you are, find the right contact, figure out the right framing. That's cognitive load. And cognitive load kills action, even when the intention is there. Zero friction bridging means you pre-build the bridge. You create the introduction template. You provide the referrer with a 1-paragraph description they can copy and paste. You even suggest the specific people in their network who might benefit, based on what you know about their world. You say something like, "You mentioned your colleague Sarah is struggling with her team's sales performance. If it would be helpful, I'd be happy to share a quick diagnostic with her nothing commitment, no pressure. Would it be useful if I sent you a short note you could forward to her?" That's zero friction. The referrer doesn't have to think. They don't have to compose. They don't have to risk their reputation by making an awkward introduction. You've done all the work. All they have to do is click forward. The practice here is preparation. Before every meeting with a potential referrer, identify 2 or 3 specific people in their network who could benefit from what you do. Not categories of people, specific individuals if possible. And prepare the bridge, the email, the message, the introduction language in advance. When the moment comes, you're not improvising. You're executing a prepared action. Let me walk you through a real scenario so you can see how all 3 components work together in practice. Imagine you're a sales professional, or really, anyone who sells their expertise, their product, or their ideas. You've just finished a project with a mid-size company. The project went well. The client is satisfied. In the old model, you'd send a thank you email and maybe awkwardly ask if they know anyone else who could use your help. In the XYZ model, here's what happens instead. During the final review meeting, you don't just present results. You walk the client through what they now understand about their own business that they didn't understand before you started working together. You say something like, "When we started, you thought the main issue was lead generation. But what we discovered together is that the real bottleneck was in the qualification process. Your team was spending 80% of their energy on prospects who were never going to close." That shift in understanding is going to keep paying dividends long after this project ends. Notice what just happened. You didn't talk about how great you are. You gave the client a narrative about their own growth. That's experience design. They now have a story about their own improvement that they'll tell at their next leadership meeting, at their next industry dinner, at their next catch-up with a peer. And you're embedded in that story, not as the hero, but as the catalyst. Then, in that same conversation, you naturally drop your yield sentence. The thing I find most interesting about this kind of work is that it's not really about sales training. It's about building a system where salespeople get smarter every single day without needing a manager standing over them. That's what the AI coaching tool does. It creates a private feedback loop, so every call makes the next call better. That's why yield positioning. You've just given your client a vivid, specific, outcome-oriented sentence they can repeat. And because it's embedded in a conversation about their own success, it doesn't feel like a pitch. It feels like insight. Then, a few days later, you send a follow-up message. Not a generic thank you, a specific note that says, "I was thinking about what you mentioned regarding your regional managers struggling with the same qualification issue. If it would be useful, I put together a short overview of how the diagnostic process works. Nothing salesy, just the framework. Happy to have you forward it to anyone on your team who might find it helpful." Here's a short note you could use if you'd like to send it along. That's zero friction bridging. You've identified a specific expansion opportunity within their network, you've created the bridge material, and you've made the act of referring you as easy as clicking forward on an email. Now here's what happens neurologically in the client's brain over the next few weeks. Every time they think about the success of that project, dopamine fires, because you train the prediction circuit with consistent, unexpected value throughout the engagement. Every time they tell someone about the insight they gained, their mirror neurons activate the social bonding pattern associated with you. And every time they forward that email or mention your name, they're performing an identity act. They're being the kind of leader who knows valuable resources and connects people to solutions. They're not doing you a favor, they're enhancing their own social capital. That's the XYZ method in action. 3 components, 3 neurological systems, 1 compounding engine. But I want to be honest about something, because I think honesty is more useful than hype. This system doesn't work overnight. It's not a hack. It's not a growth trick. It's a compound interest machine, and compound interest requires time and consistency before the returns become visible. Naval talks about this extensively, the idea that all real returns in life come from compounding. And compounding is brutal in the early stages, because you're putting in effort and seeing almost nothing come back. The first few times you practice experience design, you'll feel awkward. The first few yield sentences you write will be clumsy. The first few zero friction bridges you build will feel forced. That's normal. That's the edge of ability. That's where growth happens. And here's where I want to address a trap that I see constantly, both in myself and in the people I work with. The trap is measuring yourself by what you haven't achieved yet instead of by how far you've come. When you start implementing the XYZ method and you don't get a flood of referrals in the first month, the default response is to conclude that it doesn't work. But that conclusion is driven by the wrong metric. The right metric in the first 3 months is not how many referrals you received. It's how many interactions you upgraded. How many conversations did you leave where the other person understood their own situation better? How many yield sentences did you test and refine? How many bridges did you pre-build? Those are leading indicators. The referrals are lagging indicators. And if you quit measuring leading indicators and start obsessing over lagging indicators, you'll abandon the system right before it starts to pay off. This is the same pattern Munger warns about when he talks about the human tendency toward immediate gratification and the difficulty of long-term thinking. The referral engine rewards patience and consistency, not cleverness and intensity. You don't need to be brilliant at this. You need to be reliable at this. Now let me address something that I know some of you are thinking, because I thought it too for a long time. This sounds like a lot of work. Is it really worth it compared to just running ads or doing cold outreach? Here's the honest math. Cold outreach has a conversion rate that typically falls somewhere between 1 and 3%, depending on the channel and the offer. A well-constructed referral converts at somewhere between 30 and 50%, and sometimes higher, because it arrives preloaded with trust. It's not your credibility on the line, it's the referrer's credibility. And people treat borrowed credibility with far more respect than self-proclaimed credibility. But the math goes deeper than conversion rates. When you acquire a client through cold outreach, the relationship starts at zero trust. You have to build everything from scratch: credibility, rapport, understanding, shared context. When you acquire a client through a warm referral, the relationship starts at an elevated trust level. The ramp-up time is shorter. The sales cycle is shorter. The client is more forgiving of small mistakes because the social bond was established before you even met them. And this is the compound effect that referred client is themselves more likely to refer others because the referral behavior was modeled for them. They entered your world through a referral, so referring becomes part of how they relate to you. It's the default pattern. This is network effects applied to personal business development. Each node you add to your network doesn't just add linear value. It adds connective value, the potential for new combinations, new introductions, new opportunities that scale non-linearly. This is the Talmudic principle of knowledge entering exchange, that knowledge and relationships only become valuable when they enter circulation, when they move between people and create new possibilities in the process. A brilliant insight locked in your head is worth nothing. A powerful relationship that never expands is a ceiling, not a foundation. I want to go one level deeper here, because I think there's a philosophical dimension to this that matters for anyone who takes their work seriously. The reason most people are uncomfortable with referrals is that they think of referrals as taking, as extraction, as asking someone to spend their social capital on your behalf, and that frame makes the whole thing feel gross. Of course it does. Nobody wants to be the person who's always asking for things. But the XYZ method reframes referrals completely. In this system, you're not taking anything. You're creating a situation where the referrer benefits as much as you do, maybe more. When your client introduces you to their colleague, and you help that colleague solve a real problem, your client's status goes up. They become the person who makes things happen. They become the connector, the resource, the person who always seems to know someone. That's social capital flowing toward them, not away from them. This is the principle that if you want to build a prosperous life, you should be building prosperous lives for others. Not as charity, not as sacrifice, as architecture. You're designing a system where value flows in multiple directions simultaneously, and you're positioned at the center of that flow not because you're extracting from it, but because you're the reason it exists. When I built the AI coaching system I use for sales training, I didn't build it to impress people. I built it because I wanted to solve a real problem: the fact that salespeople get almost no meaningful feedback on their daily work. They make 50 calls, and nobody tells them which 3 moments were the difference between closing and losing. The AI changes that. It creates a private, judgment-free feedback loop where every conversation becomes a learning opportunity. And that tool, that specific piece of value, becomes something my clients want to share. Not because I ask them to, because sharing it makes them look like the kind of leader who invests in cutting-edge development for their team. The referral is a byproduct of genuine value creation. That's the engine. Let me give you a concrete practice framework you can start using this week. Not next month, not when you feel ready, this week. Day 1 and 2, write your yield sentence. One sentence that describes what changes when someone works with you. Not what you do, what changes. Test it on 3 people. Ask them to repeat it back to you 24 hours later. If they can't, rewrite it. Day 3 and 4. Review your last 5 significant client or professional interactions. For each one, ask yourself, did this person walk away understanding something about their own situation that they didn't understand before? If the answer is no for most of them, you've identified your training gap. Your interactions are pleasant but not valuable enough to generate referral fuel. Day 5. Pick one person in your current network who has been satisfied with your work. Identify one specific individual in their world who might benefit from what you do. Draft a 2-sentence introduction message that your contact could forward. Send it to your contact with a simple note. I thought this might be useful for specific person. Happy to send them a quick overview if you think it would help. Here's a note you could forward. Day 6 and 7, reflect on how each of those steps felt. Where did you feel resistance? Where did it feel natural? The resistance points are your growth edges. Those are the specific skills you need to train through repetition and refinement. Every week after that, repeat the cycle. Refine the yield sentence based on real-world testing. Upgrade one interaction to include genuine cognitive value. Build 1 zero-friction bridge. 3 actions per week. That's the minimum effective dose for the referral engine. And here's the feedback mechanism that makes this deliberate practice rather than just activity. Track 2 numbers. First, how many bridges did you build this week? Second, how many of those bridges were crossed, meaning how many of those introductions actually happened? The ratio between bridges built and bridges crossed tells you exactly where your system is weak. If you're building bridges but nobody's crossing them, your yield positioning isn't compelling enough or your bridge materials aren't frictionless enough. If you're not building any bridges at all, your experience design isn't creating enough trust and value to justify the bridge. The numbers tell you where to focus your improvement energy. I want to address one more thing before we close, because I think it's the most important point, and it's the one most likely to be missed. This entire system, the XYZ method, the neuroscience, the network effects, all of it only works if you actually have something worth referring. If the underlying value isn't there, no amount of referral engineering will save you. You can't design a referral engine for a mediocre product, a mediocre service, or a mediocre mind. The engine amplifies what's already there. If what's already there is exceptional, the amplification is extraordinary. If what's already there is average, the amplification is noise. So the referral engine is not a substitute for depth, expertise, or genuine capability. It's a multiplier, and multipliers only work when there's something substantial to multiply. This is Munger's circle of competence applied to growth strategy. Don't try to build a referral engine in areas where you're mediocre. Build it in the zone where your knowledge is deep, your insight is genuine, and your ability to create change is real. That's where the compound returns live. That's where one referral leads to 10, because every person who experiences your work becomes a believer, not just a contact. And this connects to something I think about constantly in my own work. I'm building in public. I'm developing tools, sharing ideas, refining my thinking, and I'm doing it while I'm still growing. I don't have everything figured out. What I do have is a system for getting better every single day, and a willingness to share the process honestly instead of pretending I arrived at some destination. The referral engine isn't something I mastered, and now I'm teaching from the mountaintop. It's something I'm building and improving in real time, and every video I make, every client I serve, every tool I develop is both an act of service and an act of practice. That's the real secret, if there is one. The people who build the best referral engines are not the best networkers or the smoothest talkers. They're the people who are genuinely, visibly, relentlessly committed to getting better at something that matters, because that commitment is magnetic. Not in a mystical sense, in a neurological sense. When someone watches you improve, their brain registers you as a source of increasing value. The dopamine prediction circuit adjusts upward. Their anticipation of what you'll produce next grows, and they start telling other people about you not because you asked, but because your trajectory is genuinely interesting to follow. Growth itself is the referral engine. The XYZ method just gives it structure. Here's what I'd leave you with. Referrals are not luck. They're not charm. They're not even about how good you are at your job, though that matters enormously. Referrals are the output of a deliberately designed system that makes other people want to include you in their world because including you makes their world better. Stop waiting for people to notice you. Start building the architecture that makes you impossible to forget. If this made you think differently about how you're building relationships and growing your work, follow along. There's much more to unpack, and I genuinely value having you in this conversation. Here's my question for you. Think about the last client or colleague who was genuinely happy with your work. Did you give them a clear, specific, easy way to refer you, or did you just hope they would? What happened?